So in this video, we are coming back to our example, what we are trying to achieve using Docker, Grafana, InfluxDB, and Telegraph. So we got two sites. We got a phone in each site. We got two routers, right? And we have this container. And so InfluxDB will be the database. Telegraph will be in charge of pulling the SNMP data from the routers and pushing them to InfluxDB. And then Grafana will be in charge of doing the rendering. It will create dashboards and display all the useful information that we want to use on the CSR 1000V. So we will be able to visualize and consume these data. How are we going to do that? Same thing. We're going to create a Docker file. That's our recipe. I will use that analogy again and again, but because that's what I think is very important, in my opinion, to understand, is that the Docker file is the recipe, and you put all the ingredients and all the configuration that you want into the Docker file, and then you bake it. You build the image, right? So it will create a file system snapshot with a kernel, with all the Grafana dependencies, the InfluxDB dependencies, and the Telegraph, and with configuration files. So that's also really important. So how Grafana is going to create a dashboard, which dashboard at which position should I put the number of calls, etc., etc. How Telegraph is going to push, is going to pull the data from the CSR 1000V and push the data to the InfluxDB. So it will create a file system snapshot that will result as that will be our container, right? Then we have multiple options. We can push that image to Docker Hub, which will be the full container ready to be consumed. But it will be ready to be consumed based on my recipe. And on my recipe, I have my own community strings. I have my own IP addresses. So maybe you want to change that. I guess obviously you want to change that because you want to use the same IP, you want to use the same community, and maybe you won't be using the same OIDs because the number of calls is meaningless for you. So in order to do that, we are also giving you access to the Docker file, to the recipe, so that you can use the Docker file and change the parameters directly into the Docker file. And then you will have to build your own image in order to run it with your own parameters, right? So Docker Hub and for the full container, and GitLab, GitHub as a version control software mechanism in order to share the recipe and to show you my configuration and how to share the knowledge about that. So again, that's exactly what we just discussed. That some people in my organization, if they want to play in the lab, they will maybe use the same Docker container because they will have access to the Presidio routers. But maybe some other people in Italy, they will want to share, to test it in their own environment, then they will have to change a few lines in the container, or maybe multiple lines in the container. So I'll show you how did we do. So I'm in the Docker tools. I'm not in the right directory, so let me go into the right directory. And now I will build that container, right? I will show you the code and I will build that container. So the code is very simple. It's lengthy, but it's simple and straightforward. So here is the Docker file. So I took the code from Samuel Bistoletti, and again, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel because there are many versions on the internet, on GitHub, on Docker, on the Docker Hub, where everybody is having their own implementation. So I took the implementation from Samuel, and I went a little bit further because I wanted everything to be automated. So I wanted the Grafana to have a specific dashboard with the specific information. I wanted Grafana to be directly integrated with InfluxDB, and same thing with InfluxDB. I wanted it to be integrated with the Telegraph so that the Telegraph could pull the data from the CSR 1000 and push them directly into InfluxDB. So at the beginning, so that first line looks familiar. So we will download Ubuntu 18.04 as a base image, right? And then, so we create all these variable, right? That's basically the version of the application where we did the validation, right? So we validated that it was working with the Telegraph 1.8.2-1, right? Same thing with InfluxDB and Grafana. So we validated that everything was working perfectly. So then we are going to install all the base dependencies. So we're gonna update the packages. We're gonna install some packages that are useful from a networking standpoint as well, so that we can do a little bit more with that container. And I will show you in another video how can we create a complete Docker container that is dedicated to networking DevOps. So, and then we are going to the core of the container. We are going to install. So we are going to install InfluxDB. So that's where I wanted to have my InfluxDB configuration. So we're going to install InfluxDB, and then we're going to copy the InfluxDB configuration file and init shell script, right? That I have here on my laptop, right? So that's my InfluxDB configuration that I have here, right? And I want that configuration to be my configuration when I boot up InfluxDB. So my Docker file will install InfluxDB right here, and then it will will install InfluxDB right here. Sorry, and then it will configure InfluxDB based on the configuration that is already built on my laptop. And same thing with the Telegraph, right? I will install Telegraph based on the version that is here, right? And then we're gonna use the configuration file that is on my laptop. Same thing with Grafana. We went a little bit further with Grafana because we want Grafana to be automatically connected to InfluxDB, right? And we want the Grafana to be automatically able to create the dashboard that we want. So the dashboard are in the JSON format. So we can see, for example, Grafana provisioning. So the UC data source, for example. So that's the configuration so that we can map our InfluxDB database to Grafana. And same thing here, we get the dashboard. So we can see in the dashboard, it's a JSON file where we will be able to say we want to monitor the interface in and out, the interface gigabit 0 in and out, number of calls, etc., etc., etc. All right, and so we will build the container right now. So we'll build the container. So docker build -t. Let me see if we have the image first, so that we don't lose time. Yes, we already have the image, but I will show you how, because the Docker file is a little bit more complicated, is a little bit more, it has more, so I will show you the process by using another tag. So docker build -t, Presidio TIG, and I'm in the right folder, so yeah, let's do it. So as you can see, it went very, very fast, right? Because it was able to process the Docker file, and for each line of the Docker file, it will create an intermediate container that will have an ID, right? And so at the end, we have multiple layers of containers, and at the end, we have the full containers, if I can say. We have a complete containers, and which has that tag. that ID. Sorry. So that's his ID. So that's the ID of the image, and that's the tag of the image. So, and we have that ID because it's exactly the same as the other IDs that I have here, because I already have multiple versions. So nothing has changed. I just wanted to play with the tags. And as you can see, no matter what name I give to my image, as long as I have the same image ID, the Docker file don't have to be reprocessed. Well, it has to be reprocessed, but if it doesn't change, it doesn't have to be re-download, etc., etc. So if I change something in the Docker file, yes, it will re-download everything, and it can be it can be very long. So now we're gonna run it. Docker run, and then so let me do some copy paste here. It will be much faster. So Presidio TIG, and then the remaining of the command. And as you can see now, it gives me an ID. So if I go into that container, if I just if I log into the container, if I can say, so I'm logged in now, I can log into the database, right? And I can see, I'm logged into InfluxDB, I can see all the database that we have. So as you can see now, we have a UC database, a network database, a vPacket database. So we should have another one. Yeah, you can see it was still processing. So we get now the Telegraph database. So if we use the Telegraph database, so now we can see all the measurement. We can have we have the CPU, the disk I/O, the kernel, the mem. But wait a little bit, and we'll see that as we move forward, it will add more and more information here, more tables. So as you can see here, we got now more tables. The Cisco CSR 1000V calls, interface, and the uptime. So that's because Telegraph was taking some time to boot up and to pull the data from the CSR 1000V so that it would create a table. Well, InfluxDB will create a table when it receives the data. So for example, if we do select all from uptime, we can see that we have multiple values here. So let's see in Grafana if everything is set up so that so everything is set up. So let's go to Grafana. So I'm logging in. You can see I already have these. So this is the first time I'm logging into Grafana, and you can see I already have a dashboard UC-USA. You remember the JSON file a little bit earlier. So that's our that was the configuration that was done, and you can see that we have at the moment 0 number of calls, right? Because it's a lab environment, obviously, in this case. And we can see that we are pulling the data from the CSR 1000V for the gigabit 1 and gigabit 2 interfaces. We also have the uptime. So we created a variable. So if we reboot the router right now, the uptime would be like 30 seconds. Would be like 30 seconds, and it will change the color right here, so that we can visualize directly on that dashboard if the router has been rebooted previously. So how can we improve what we've just done, right? A nice way to do that would be to have a dedicated container for InfluxDB, because if you want to have that container in a live environment, it will have a lot of data from time to time. So the size of the InfluxDB database will be bigger and bigger. So it will be valuable to have a dedicated container just for InfluxDB. So that's one way, and we will see that a little bit later. How can we create multiple containers at the same time with the Docker Compose CLI? We'll see that in another video.